Coming up next, we're going to get some new panelists on the stage, and we're going to have Jay and Steve and Bob, and we're going to talk a little bit about those songs that you get stuck in your head, that you either love them or you hate them. But first, we're going to let Floating Action get a song stuck in your head. Thanks so much for being at the first Lingua Musica show. Give it up for Floating Action.
Thank you again. We're so glad to be here. Some Black Mountain friends here. This is a song called Digging. I keep a closet full, a master bedroom too, of shovels one or two, depending on my mood. I try to find a secret too. Sometimes you just don't feel like digging. I get up from the floor, it looked to see it pour, rain down upon my trail, you buried in a ditch, just like a grave, you hold me like a king. Yeah, sometimes you just don't feel like digging. So sometimes you just don't feel like digging. Well, sometimes you just don't feel like digging. But sometimes you just don't feel like digging. It looks like right up time, I lost my soul, I'm blind. I'm blinded to your sign. You take it all in stride, just like a queen. Royalty divine. Sometimes you just don't feel like digging. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks very much to Floating Action. You are at the first Lingua Musica show, and we're broadcasting online from the White Horse in Black Mountain. I'm very happy to bring to the stage Bob Hinkle, Jay Sanders, Steve McMurry. You got to meet them earlier, and tonight we're going to wrap up the conversation part of the show with a little talk about something that's probably pretty easy for a lot of people to think of as well. And we're talking about some of the songs that you can't get out of your head. And either for good or for bad, what do these songs say about us? What do these songs say about the songs themselves? And are they, that much more powerful because they drive us nuts? I hand it off to you, Steve.
Well, I took the liberty of doing a little research on the subject today, and over the last couple of days. Apparently, there is something to it. It's not just a random physiological response to something that happens to you. There's a guy named James Calaris who did quite a bit of, well, I guess he did the definitive work on the subject at the University of Cincinnati. And his thoughts are that you are infected with something called an earworm. And I don't say that lightly. That word is adapted from a German word called, which I dare not pronounce, but it's spelled with a U. But anyway, it is something that happens to you. And according to these guys, this guy was a marketing researcher for the University of Cincinnati, and he did years of study on this. So I don't know if there were any tax dollars involved there. But anyway, apparently what happens is your brain hears this little snippet of a song that's either odd or it strikes your fancy for some reason, whatever reason. And during its normal processes, it's trying to complete that song. Now, whether it has enough data stored to complete the song or not, all it's trying to do is finish that song. There's a couple of, he did a lot of research on this, and believe it or not, the two most famous sticky songs, as he calls them, sticky songs are the ones that get stuck in your head. And Floating Action may know something about this, but the two that he brought up over and over and over again that I saw on the research was the Chili's Baby Back Ribs song. And, you know, I want my baby back, baby back, baby back, baby back ribs. That one.
Makes me hungry.
Yeah. And the other one was Who Let the Dogs Out. So, yeah, Roo. So everybody knows that one. So you see how that works. It's something that your brain finds interesting or for some reason or other it has committed to memory a small part of that. And even though it can't complete the song or the sentence, it's trying to, and that's why you get stuck in that loop. Well, you know, this also can be sinister in a way, and it can be just a terrible affliction. I know that I've had songs stuck in my head for days on end. I've got a friend of mine, Mark, who plays a horrible trick on me every so often. He will call me up on my cell phone knowing that I can't answer the phone, and he'll wait till it goes to voicemail, and he'll go, "Motor in!" and then hang up the phone. And so I've got, you know, Sister Christian stuck into my head for the rest of the day. So, and this works, I'm telling you. If you got somebody that you're pissed off at, this is a good way to get at them. And so recently, he's the master at this, so I thought long and hard about it, and so I came up with a good rebuttal, and I phoned him back one day with a really nasty one from REO Speedwagon. But anyway, he sat on that for about 3 days, and finally he texted me back and texted the words to this song and said, "I'm giving this one back. It's making me sick." So you can actually become physically ill from having a song stuck in your head. But for my part, I thought I would just try to give a little bit of scientific data as to why you do that. Now, the other more philosophical things I'll leave to people that know better about that.
Thank you, doctor.
You know, they say there's a cure for that. Actually, it's try to. I just want to say the word earworm again. That's a great word. But I've actually heard that if you try to get through as many words from Private Dancer as you can, that it'll actually clear out an earworm out of your mind. It's like the eraser. What I think is interesting about what you just said, though, is the fact that this research was all done by a marketing professional, which really pays tribute into the idea that this is something that makes up who you are and becomes a fundamental part of your being. Like, we all can think of songs that we grew up listening to, situations that put songs into our heads and whatnot, but it's also so heavily manipulated by marketing companies and even by what they were just talking about with the music industry. What I think of, and I developed this idea of being from Nashville, is that, like, you know, pop music is like an assembly line. It's like a factory, and they really grab onto this idea of the earworm in order to make these hits, in order to cash in on it and make a lot of money, you know. And I think it's a really interesting thing to look at it from that perspective. But there's so many great songs out there, and they become part of who you are. And also from a point of view of a composer or someone who's writing a song. And Steve, you're by far one of my favorite songwriters, so you probably know a lot more about this than I do. But when I'm working on a song and it sticks in my head, even before I've written it down, I usually try to come up with an idea and let it sit and simmer before I ever put it on paper. And if 3 days later I can still remember it exactly the way that it was without ever having to write it down, I know that that's actually something worth keeping, because it already has a resonant frequency with my soul. And hopefully that means that there's other souls out there that'll vibrate on that same level and find a similar resonance with that meaning.
Or it could mean you just weren't drinking enough.
That is very possible.
Not in my case.
I thought I'd make it specific if I could. Way back in 1964, I think. Yeah, way back there. I was in a band in Chapel Hill, and we'd made some records, and we did some touring, and we'd gotten a call from New York. There was a producer who wanted us to come to New York and record. So we started up about sundown out of Chapel Hill and got to New York, or actually before sundown, got to New York 3, 4 in the morning, whatever it was, and came over the up the New Jersey Turnpike, and we're listening to WABC AM radio, and they were debuting Rubber Soul, the Beatles' Rubber Soul LP. And every note of that LP, as I drove up the New Jersey Turnpike, looking at the skyline of New York City, got emblazoned in my very soul. So it's all still in there somewhere. And Michelle and Think for Yourself and all those great songs are there. Of course, there's a part 2 to that story too, which is that we got ensconced in our hotel, which was the Hotel America on the old Times Square as opposed to the new Times Square. The fire alarm rang at about 4 o'clock in the morning or something the next night, and I was out on the street with everybody from the hotel, and I heard a cop and the manager having a discussion, and it turned out that there were about 128 people on the street and 63 registered in the hotel, so it knocked a hole in my perfect vision. But I still know everything that has anything to do with Rubber Soul. Now, if you want me to drive you crazy a little bit more, as a former manager of the Jay Giles Band, I'll try this. Na 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 na. Right? One more. Also in the 60s, in my home in Manhattan, I had a white Philco clock radio, which during the summer of '68 delivered an awful lot of bad news to my living room. Assassinations aplenty. All sorts of bad stuff happening. It was making me very depressed. One thing that I heard for the first time on that radio was Abraham, Martin, and John, and there wasn't a dry eye in my home, I'll tell you. But the other thing that I heard, on a lighter side, was, I don't know if anybody remembers, but John Sebastian, formerly of the 11 Spoonful, once recorded a song that was 29 seconds long called She's a Lady. There's one.
I remember that song.
There you go. WMCA AM radio in New York, which was a very powerful AM radio station, somehow, and for some reason, and I don't know what transpired, some insidious thing transpired, but they played She's a Lady for an hour and a half, nonstop, 29 seconds, 29 seconds, 29 seconds. And I never figured out how many copies of the current Sebastian album it sold the next week, but I would pretty much assure you it was in the 6 figures. So, it's situational too, as well as being research-oriented.
Yeah. Well, there's also the songs that aren't bad. I remember a couple of from my childhood that, growing up in the church, that my family was heavily involved in the church in those days. I remember one particular instance attending a funeral of somebody that we loved very much, and there was a song that 4 old men sang, and I can still see their faces, and I know that I wouldn't remember this. This wouldn't have been burned on my hard drive had it not been such a poignant moment for me at that time. And I even know what the room smelled like when that song was going on. So it's not just something getting stuck in your head. It's also a trigger mechanism. It can usher in a whole cacophony of memories and sounds and sights and smells and things that you associate with that at that particular moment.
Yeah, I think some of that comes into play as to how these songs get stuck in your head is probably a good bit of what was happening to you at the time that the song was playing. And that sort of memory that is associated with music is often very, very memorable and is just that much harder to forget, for good or for bad. We're live at the first Lingua Musica show at the White Horse in Black Mountain. We're also online at linguamusicalive.com, where we can pick up your comments from Twitter using the hashtag #LinguaMusica.